Venus and star blessings, everyone. I want to talk about the upcoming lunar eclipse, which is taking place in Libra. This will be the first eclipse of 2024. And altogether, we're going to have 4 eclipses, actually. 3 of them will be in the axes of Aries and Libra, and there will be 1 in the axes of Virgo and Pisces, which is happening in September. This particular lunar eclipse, which is starting off the season of eclipses for us, well, there's quite a few things I want to say about it. And obviously the themes are going to be primarily about relationships, all relationships, right? Because Libra corresponds to any partnership or relationship, be it personal, professional, be it family, be it friends, doesn't matter. Just the fact that it's a relationship of some kind connects to the archetype of Libra in the zodiac. I was inspired the other day by listening to a group of women. Couple were astrologers and most of them weren't. But anyway, it was a group of women who just sat together in a circle, as it were, and offered their perspective through their knowledge, through their wisdom, through their intuition, whatever it is, just their sense of things at the moment on the earth plane, and the cosmic sort of sentiment of where humanity is at. And every person had a beautiful offering, but there was one particular lady who I was really, really taken by. I don't know her age, but she's she's older. Like, I want to say she's probably in her 70s. And she's not an astrologer, but I've checked out her website because I was just so moved by her offering. And she only spent a few minutes talking, but primarily from what I can see on her website, she's a speaker who does like public, speaking and so forth, all about the sacred feminine, the sacred divine feminine. And she's got some exquisite articles on her website. Her name is actually Anne Baring, and Baring is spelled B-A-R-I-N-G. So I just want to start with a comment that she has on on an article she's written called A Definition of the Feminine. She says, the word feminine stands for the soul and the unseen cosmic web of life that connects each one of us to all others, and to the life of the planet and the greater life of the cosmos. I think she's just worded that in such an exquisite way to reflect and describe the archetype or the energy of the cosmic divine feminine that has been, as we are aware, largely suppressed and lost over thousands of years, really. In her talk throughout this circle of women, one thing she raised, which I thought it's such an obvious thing, but in her eloquence of speaking, the way she said it, it was just very, very moving. And she said something and I'm paraphrasing, but she said something like, where has humanity really come to? Where has humanity arrived in that we are still, after 2,000-3,000 years, acting in the same way relative to war and aggression, killing each other? How is it that humanity has, after so many years, lost complete touch with the transcendence, the transcendental component of our infinite nature? How have we lost touch with that the soul, the intuition, the divine feminine in such a way for such a long time that we, are just so out of touch with the sacred feminine, right? The sacred feminine would basically unify everything. It would bring that unity forth, and it would bring that unity through love and the heart. So it was, she didn't say exactly those last few words, I've just added that in myself, but she spoke along those lines, and she did make reference actually to Gaza and Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan, just those very extremely troubled areas on the planet. in reference to just the behavior of human beings. Anyway, overall, everything she shared was just so moving, which is why I was inspired to look her up. And as I said, she's she's got books and videos from what I see here on her website. You can just put in her name and you'll find her website. I just want to read as well something else she says here. Relative to the feminine. It stands for the recognition that we live within a sacred order and that we have responsibility to protect life, to protect the life of the planet and all the variety of species it embraces, instead of exploiting them for the benefit of our species alone. In sum, the word feminine stands for totally different perspective on life, a totally different worldview or paradigm of reality, and for the feeling values which might reflect and support that worldview. It stands for a new planetary consciousness and the artist's creation of a new kind of civilization. Without reconnecting to the soul and the guidance and wisdom of the feminine, without going in search of the values it represents and opening our heart to the subtle guidance, we will not understand the purpose of our presence on this planet, nor will we be able to disempower the unconscious atavistic tendencies which draw us ever closer to the destruction of our habitat and therefore to self-annihilation. I just love the way she writes. She's such a brilliant writer. She goes really to the heart and soul of the sacred feminine, the wisdom held within the sacred feminine. And she actually makes reference to not only the sacred divine feminine, but to the sacred divine masculine as well. And I think most of the body of her work is all pointing to that very necessary need for the union, right, of this masculine and feminine, because the split that is present is responsible for the masculine coming through with such aggression, because its counterpart feminine is just not has been suppressed, is not being honored and revered as it should be. It's just one more line I'd like to read. She says, like the magma of the earth's core, the long repressed feminine principle is rising to meet the masculine, one in response to a deep soul impulse to balance and marry these archetypal energies within ourselves and within our world. Once again, what a beautiful description of the divine feminine and divine masculine. And I bring all this up today because, first of all, it's so inspiring and so nourishing for the soul, these words, and finding a connection and meaning through these words, I feel is very nourishing to our heart and to our soul. And furthermore, we're talking about a Libra lunar eclipse, which means the moon is opposite the sun. It's a full moon, but it happens to be an eclipse, and it's actually a partial eclipse. Lunar eclipses can either be partial or total. In this case, it's a partial eclipse, which, technically speaking, is said that it's not as powerful as a total lunar eclipse, but it still has potency. It still has meaning. It will still vibrate a particular frequency, and it is in the sign of Libra, which is the sign of partnerships and relationships. Its ruler, of course, is Venus, because Venus rules Libra. And what is Venus about? Venus is about love, and Venus is about relationships. At the highest vibratory level, the goddess Venus is about love at the highest level. And so the moon is opposite the sun, which is what a full moon is, and the sun's in Aries, right? So it's not only Libra that we are exploring here or tapping into, we are tapping into a polarity of Libra and Aries. And Libra and Aries, of course, is the axis in the wheel that corresponds to basically ourself and the other, so all relationships really. And we can also say that in the context of everything that I've just said, these are the principles of divine feminine, divine masculine. And when you're talking about a polarity, we are always looking at two signs, right, on the axes. So we are looking at ourself, you know, our own identity and how we are stepping into our relationships. And Libra, of course, is the mirror. And also it is very much about recognizing our own identity, but also recognizing the identity of the other in the partnership, right? Which is basically a form of unification, isn't it? Right. So we're talking about an eclipse that perhaps at a more higher level spiritually is pointing to this union that we must all come to within ourselves first and foremost, and then obviously experience that in all our relating and relationships, because like I always say, everything is born from within us. Everything we see is connected to us. A lot of things we see are projections of our own unconscious shadow material and so forth. So the more we can unify this divine feminine and divine masculine within ourselves, the more we can actually create this balance and harmony within ourselves, and the more we can have this sense of unity with the divine masculine, divine feminine within us, and therefore see it around us and experience it in our life, in all relationships, in summary. Okay, so let's go to the chart and look at some of the astrology for this lunar eclipse. So this is the chart for the lunar eclipse, and of course this is based in my current location, which is Melbourne. So don't worry about the house position of everything, because it will change based on your location. And furthermore, it's always a lot more useful, at least from your own personal journey and perspective, to have a look at where this full moon eclipse lands in your own birth chart, because you are working with this energy yourself, right? For your own evolution, for your own consciousness, for your own nourishment, for your own self-awareness. And self-awareness is probably one of the best words for a lunar eclipse. It's a full moon. A full moon, which is an opposition, is ultimately the portal that leads to illumination, clarity, self-awareness. It illuminates things that were previously out of our vision, out of our scope of vision, or out of our consciousness. So a full moon is always an opportunity to see. It usually actually highlights and brings up things that have been brewing or building from the past, and now we just step into a window where we actually see either what we've been working on consciously, or even matters that we've been very unconscious about. So it is a time of illumination. And it is also primarily connected to matters of the past, because the moon, first of all, corresponds to the past. The moon is very closely aligned to the south node and the north node. And that's what actually defines a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. It's usually the sun and the moon closely aligned to the nodal axes, which is what we see here. And the reason you see the moon at 5 degrees of Libra and the south node at 15 degrees of Libra is because it's a partial eclipse. So they haven't actually reached a proximity of being more tightly close, like a degree apart or whatever it may be. That would be like a total lunar eclipse, for instance. But in any case, it's still very important. And because it is the moon on the south node, it is obviously speaking to relationships of the past. It also speaks to our attitudes of relationships pertaining to the past. Perhaps it will highlight to us how we have grown within ourselves relative to all our current relationships. So it basically will, illuminate and highlight attitudes, perspectives, beliefs, values, and all of that can, as it exists in our life in the scheme of all our relationships. Because Venus is the ruler of this lunar eclipse, she's the ruler because she rules Libra. And she is exalted in the sign of Pisces, which I think, yes, does help but she's also conjunct Saturn, although she's moved on from the exact conjunction to Saturn. She's still within very close proximity to Saturn. So her energy is still very much influenced by Saturn. Now, Saturn speaks to many, many different things, but one thing it speaks to for sure is separation and or karmic relationships and karmic separations in terms of past, right? So the fact that Venus is conjunct Saturn here, and this energy here, Venus particularly, is the ruler of the moon sign, then, and the moon sign is Libra. So we can see that there's a buildup of layers all pointing us to these themes of relationships, our own relationships, and just simply how we relate, I guess, to anything really, because anything we do or engage in or participated in, there's a form of relating going on always, right? When you were talking about connecting with somebody or sharing with somebody or relating with somebody or talking to somebody or listening to somebody, there's a form of relating going on that's fundamentally a Venus principle, right? So for that reason, it can connect to your whole attitude and engagement in how you relate to life, really, in general. So there's a very specific, strong theme here that will come to light for us in our own consciousness, in our own self, about this relating principle. Not only the relating principle, but also our own identity as well, because it is Aries Libra. Aries is our own identity, how we express that identity. And the sun in Aries is exalted. It's a very strong position for the sun to be in. Exaltations are very considered quite a high dignity in terms of the essential dignities and abilities scheme. So the sun is quite happy in Aries, it rejoices there. It's where we experience the beginning of spring in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the position where when the sun reaches 0 degrees of Aries, we have the equinox happen. So it's a very important portal and energy, right? So let me think, there was something else I wanted to say to that, and just it's just escaped my mind. I think it was this, yes. Okay. So the full moon is trine Pluto, which is great. Pluto, of course, speaks to evolution, the evolution of every individual soul. And when we're looking at it in this context, it is, speaking to, once again, to our own individual evolution, but certainly to the collective evolution as well, because we are looking at a chart that is reflecting the sky in terms of the tropical zodiac and the alignment of the collective energies, right? So there are two levels. There's this energy speaks to the collective field, and it also speaks to us individually. So Pluto being the planet of evolution and the soul, and how we progressively evolve, and I suppose, remove conditioned layers to come closer and closer to the desires of the soul in a more conscious way. So in other words, Pluto trine the soul is facilitating a process here in order to help us transform and evolve to some extent matters around relationships once again. So Pluto is really helping us in this portal, which is it's neither good or bad. I don't like to use those words, because if it was a square, I would just simply say that it's a lot more challenging. For example, the energy is a lot more potent and dynamic. But when you have a trine aspect with Pluto, it generally speaks to there's no there's much less or no resistance to the necessary part of the journey that's coming up, in this case being relationships, right? So there's a facilitation from Pluto in this process of us recognizing and being more clear, opposition, full moon, more aware, more illuminated in our understanding of our relationships and how we are relating to the world at large. So Pluto is facilitating this process, which I think is, you know, very, very encouraging and very, very positive. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning as well, which I briefly touched on this when I did my equinox video a few days ago, Neptune is very close to the sun. Even still, it's very close to the sun. So it's an out of sign conjunction, but it's still there. So that means it's an out of sign opposition with the moon, right? So I guess the thing is that Pluto is the closer planet in terms of aspects and orbs here. And so I forgot to mention that Pluto is trine the moon, but it's also sextiling the sun. So there's a trine and sextile, soft aspects. Both aspects speak to support, no resistance or little resistance, and opportunity. Sextiles speak to opportunity. So there's a, you know, there's a real gift being offered here to us from the power of the god of the underworld, Pluto. Right? Our soul contracts with relationships, our soul energy is supporting us with this lunar eclipse, if you like. But I must recognize that, as I said, Neptune's very close to the sun and very close to the opposition to the moon. And so, you know, of course, at worst, Neptune is always disappointment or disillusionment or confusion. And at best, it is the dissolving of false structures, let's say, the dissolving of things that just need to leave your life as well. So it depends on you. It depends on what's going on in your life. It depends, you know, how you feel into this energy, how, just how you feel and where you're at, really. But I would say just, you know, be aware that Neptune is there as well, which can be a little bit tricky. And yeah, Neptune really almost always brings up disappointment. The disappointment arises primarily because we project the ideal onto someone or something. And perhaps in our hopes and dreams and, you know, ideals of what we want or what we desire, once we project that onto another human being, we've just projected onto a hook that actually ends up disappointing us. Because in the human form, no human being can live up to that ideal. It's not because they're not a good person. It's not because they don't want to. It's because they can't. Nobody can. Neptune is the ultimate truth, source, creation to all things. So even though we are an expression of the source of all things and a divine spark of consciousness from the infinite consciousness, we are a part of that, but we are a part of that expressing and living through this physical body in this physical reality with a biological clock, with conditioned imprints, with very specific beliefs or values, with very specific limitations. You know, so there are a lot of things that come into our field of experience as a way of being human, and all of it is connected to evolution primarily. The point being, however, that in our human form, I don't think we can be that complete, utter, total, infinite God source. It's just not possible in the human form because we have this ego and personality and so on and so forth. So, you know, when you project that Neptune energy onto a situation or a person, you are projecting this God or goddess desire onto a human being that couldn't possibly live out this ideal that you have. Thus, the disappointment arrives. So that's what I see Neptune brings up over and over again when it's, you know, when you're having a strong Neptune transit, particularly to one of your angles of your chart or one of your personal planets. I've got Neptune on my Venus, had it there for the last 2 years. And so what I'm telling you is not a theory, it's factual. I've been living it myself the last couple of years. And it's just something that we all need to learn and go through, you know. And I guess then it brings us back to that that understanding of Aries Libra from the point of view of recognizing and standing strong in your own sense of identity, but also being able to receive and accept the other in their own right with their identity as well. That's the balance and the harmony between the Aries Libra axis. It's knowing who you are and appreciating and valuing another, and perhaps having a relationship with another person and being able to maintain your own identity whilst at the same time respecting that person's position and identity, something that lacks in a lot of relationships. And one of the inherent problems, of course, with this Aries Libra component can be, this stems more out of Taurus, but we could say it's Aries Libra as well. When we step into Libra, the problem occurs when we lose our own identity and merge so much with the other person, Libra, 7th house, that we've lost who we are in this partnership or this relationship. And the opposite to that would be that we do the Aries thing, and that is that we cannot value and see the other person in the way they need to be seen, because we are just so identified with our own self, with our own identity, and we don't do the Libran thing, meet somebody halfway. These are very strong themes really throughout of all of 2024, right? In terms of core themes and core meanings connected to the Aries Libra axis, which is totally amplified throughout this year because of the solar and lunar eclipses. Now, this lunar eclipse as well is leading us into one of the most powerful eclipses of the year, which is the solar eclipse that occurs basically 2 weeks after this full moon, which is going to be the new moon, right? And it's a total solar eclipse. Of course, I will come back to speak about that, so I will not unpack that right now, but I think it's important to keep in mind that whatever we become clear about at this point in time here, whatever we understand better about ourselves, or whatever things we sort of clear out and release during this time, is going to be very important for what we step into relative to the upcoming solar eclipse in Aries. Now, solar eclipses are really potent because they tend to be more covert. The manifestations of solar eclipse tend to be seen a lot more. Versus a lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipses tend to be, because it is lunar, it is moon, it is feminine, it therefore naturally corresponds more to the interior, the inner world, and also our subconscious mind as well. Subconscious, and you could even say unconscious to a degree, but certainly the subconscious mind. So it's very much an inner experience with lunar eclipses, mostly, for the most part. But, you know, with solar eclipses, things happen on the physical plane. Big things usually happen, not for every single person, not for every single soul, because then we'd have, you know, 8.5 billion people on the planet, you know, 3-4 times every year, having massive transitions in their life every year, 4 times. It just doesn't work like that, right? So I like to maintain a realistic and grounded perspective when we're looking at the energies of anything for that matter, but in this case, eclipses, because some people, just some people like to promote their video or their channel or themselves or whatever, and they do that with really really fancy or over the top captions about what they're going to talk about, lunar eclipse, whatever, and it's just to grab more viewers, really, and that's not why I'm here. That's not the way I work, and you guys who follow me are very well aware of that. We've got to be realistic, we've got to be authentic, we've got to be congruent, we've got to be honest. I think that's so important because it's just so lacking, so lacking, and when we're not that, then there's this misleading others, misguiding others, for agendas or ulterior motives, and that's not a good way to walk the path. I don't think. I do my best to walk the path of authenticity to my best capability. I'm not saying I'm perfect, far from it, but I am honest and I am authentic. That I know. And Pluto is in Aquarius. Aquarius certainly corresponds to authenticity. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, the planet that absolutely speaks to being authentic. Being authentic is not an easy thing. Some people might think being authentic is, well, isn't that just a given? No, it's not a given. Because when you are authentic, you have to establish a very clear and deep inner understanding of who you are. Most people's, let's say, perceptions or beliefs or thoughts or understanding about many things often comes from something they've been taught that validates that perspective, right? They feel heard or seen or valued because that group of people or that person or whatever it is, or that institution or that ruler or whatever it is of the same view, right? It's the herd, if I can just put it like that. It's the herd mentality, right? And to step outside of that, we've got to go to Uranus to find our own authentic path and be that, express that, live that. Doesn't matter if nobody else accepts it. That's the challenge in it, right? Most people won't do that because most people like to be accepted. They like to be part of a group or part of a community. They feel more validated. It takes a lot of courage, confidence to step into authenticity because you might be doing it completely alone until you find your soul tribe. So I think this is part of the picture here as well because, Pluto's in Aquarius, trining the lunar eclipse, saying, it's time to evolve out of old ways of relating, out of old partnerships that you've outgrown, you've outlived. No relationship is right or wrong. Every relationship that comes to you for a reason and a purpose, which primarily has to do with your growth. So nothing is wrong with anything that's happening. It's all part and parcel of us waking up, becoming more conscious, evolving, growing, developing, progressing. Always. Every portal, every energy, every transit largely has that as a theme attached to it, really. So that's, I guess, the main things I wanted to point to today. Let me just have a look here. Yes, thanks. Just finally, before I go, the solar eclipse that's following this lunar eclipse is it is really going to be very, very intense, you know, very, very intense. But the main thing that, and I want to come back and talk about this in depth, but I just want to highlight it as something to reflect on, I suppose, for the next couple of weeks. The solar eclipse coming up in Aries, which is on my dad's birthday, is exactly conjunct Chiron to the degree. I think to the minute as well, but I need to double check that. I was certain that it was to the minute, but it might be a few seconds off. Now, we're not going to split hairs over 30 seconds or a minute or a few seconds. It's literally right there, Chiron. See how Chiron is very close to the North Node here, and Chiron has been very close to the North Node, you know, the last few weeks, right? So what's going to happen is the sun is going to continue to climb through, you know, the degrees of Aries, and ultimately it's going to come to Chiron and North Node. That's what's going to happen. So the sun, North Node, Chiron, and the moon are all going to line up there. So it's going to be a total solar eclipse, new moon, with Chiron. And I've got so much to say about that, so I'll leave it, but just keep that in mind, because what are we doing here with this lunar eclipse? We are healing. We are letting go of past attitudes, past relationships, things that we've outgrown in terms of our relating style, period, about everything, with everything. And ultimately, as I started this video making reference to the divine feminine, the absolute necessity of us continuously working on that integration of the divine feminine, divine masculine. So the marriage in the highest form can come back into place in us so that we can see it on this earth. That's what this is about at the highest level. Yes, okay, so that's it. And I just also want to say before I leave, I just had a class, I did a class on Venus just on Friday, which was yesterday. It's almost 4 hours, this class, and I'm happy for people to reach out if they want access to this class webinar. It's part of a 12, not week, but 12 topic series that I'm actually currently offering. And this particular class on Venus was on the Venus star point, Venus in Babylonian astrology, Venus in Hellenistic astrology, Venus from a natal perspective versus the Venus star point, how to locate your Venus star points, how to understand the rhythm and flow of which star point feeds into which, because you're always looking at a pentagram, which is the 2 arms, 2 legs, and the head, right? Understanding the rhythm and the sequence of the signs as they connect to one another, because there's a lot of things to understand about that as well. Venus's nodes, we also spoke about that. Venus has nodes, just like the moon does, just like every other planet does, for that matter. So it's quite a pretty fascinating and interesting class, and there's a lot of really important content there that you can work with. You know, whether you are a beginner or advanced, doesn't really matter. You will certainly take value from this webinar or this class. So reach out if you're interested, or if you want to know about the other classes that I've got going on as well. And I will see you guys very, very soon. So yeah, I hope you are all doing well, and I hope some of, or all of, or some of, or any part of what I shared today has inspired you in some kind of way. And yeah, just keep working on yourself, because that's the most important thing. It really, really is. There's so much going on in the world, and we have very little control over most of it, if any. the thing that we do have some power and some control over is ourself. And everything to do with ourself. So that's the primary relationship we need to be really conscious of working on. See you soon.